Hi, my name is Kerry Holzman, and before we get to today's build, I want to give a shout out to James McCreadie over in Scotland. I've been meaning to make this video and to acknowledge James for a long time. Just one thing leads to another, and anyway, better late than never. James watches my videos from Scotland and has built a computer from watching my videos and has even created a video to share with me his success. So here's James's video.
Hello Kerry, this is James from Scotland. You sent me this inspired by Kerry Holzman plaque. This is one of the computers I built thanks to you. Just like to say I'm really grateful for all your videos. It's really helped me unbelievably. I've never been able to do this without watching you. So thanks very much.
Thank you, James, and to honor you, I've got an Irn Bru, or Irn Bru. I'm not sure how you guys say it. I know it used to be called Irn Bru, and then the food labeling laws changed in Scotland, and they had to change it to BRU. They couldn't actually call it a brew since it's not brewed. Irn Bru is the top-selling drink in Scotland. For many years, decades, it outsells Coke, it outsells Pepsi. It's the #1 selling drink in Scotland. I never heard of it before. I imagine anybody in the United States never heard of this, but you can get it on Amazon, and I thought, this one's for you, James, and I thought we'd give it a shot here and see what this stuff tastes like. It kind of looks like rust. I'm not exactly sure. It is, it tastes like an orange creamsicle with fizz. It's not bad. Not bad. I don't understand how it's the #1 selling drink. I don't think it's that good. But, you know, to each their own. I'll put that right over here beside my Coke. If you have made a computer from following my videos and you'd like to share a video or pictures of your build with me, please do that. I want to put together a video of my viewers' videos and accomplishments, photos of their builds. That helps to inspire others who perhaps are talking themselves out of it, thinking, I'll screw it up. I'll make a mistake. I'll ruin it. We want to encourage people to show them that anybody can really do this if you just take your time and enjoy your build. And what better proof than for all of you out there to submit your photos and your videos to me. So for videos, just post it to YouTube. Make your own YouTube channel if you don't already have one. Put it up there and put your link on my Facebook page. Or if you have photos, you want to share those photos, please share those on my Facebook page as well. So the link for my Facebook page is right down there. And I'd love to include you in my next video. Now let's get to today's build. What we've got, Corsair 200R case, CX750M modular power supply, Windows 7 Professional, 32 gigs of DDR4. DDR4, not DDR3. What does that tell you? That tells you we're using the latest Skylake processor from Intel. This is the Core i7. This particular model is the 6700. It's 3.4 gigahertz. Comes with a cooling fan. Some people think all the Skylakes don't come with cooling fans. Obviously, that's not true. It's the overclockable chips that don't come with cooling fans, because if you're going to overclock them, the cooling fans, the stock cooling fans won't be enough. This is not overclockable, so the stock fan is perfect and beautiful. We're combining that with a 4 terabyte mechanical Western Digital drive, a 1 terabyte Samsung Evo solid state drive to make our boot up time as quickly as possible. We've got a regular CD DVD reader writer right there. This one is from LG. Customer needs a wireless, so we've got a TP-Link wireless card. This one is an N900. For the motherboard, of course, we've got to use the H170 chipset, so we're using the Gigabyte H170 D3HP motherboard, and combining that with a GeForce GTX 980 Ti. That's this component right down here. By now, you've seen me with a couple of builds using these. I think it's the best bang for the buck right now. Try not to slam them down that hard. And this build is going to go a little quicker than other builds you've seen me do. Now, there are no hard, steadfast rules as to which component should be installed first. I have a routine I like to use, And that's the basis behind which parts I install first, just purely based on my personal preference from experience. So what we've got out here is the power supply and all the drives, right? Optical drive, solid state drive, and hard drive. And of course the case. And look at this. I got a lazy Susan. Look at that. Thank you, Amazon. All right. We can start with the Corsair 200R case. We've got our documentation, which is completely useless, and it can go right over there. Let's turn this around. Let's get the covers off of it. This is going to also be the final step in our build when we're finished with it, is to put these covers back on. So you want to put these covers away. Whew, it's difficult working on the lazy Susan. Wants to move on me. Take out the 4 screws and put these 4 screws away, because they will be the last 4 screws you're going to put back in. We're going to pull one panel off and set it aside where it won't get damaged. And we'll take the other panel off here. And there's the inside of our case. Inside the case, we've got the box of the parts. Let's go ahead and remove that and dump out the parts, because we're going to need the screws and cable ties that are included with the case. Every case comes with the screws you need to mount the components within. Now, of these screws, there will be a bag that contains these very coarse short screws that are used for case fans. There are also some really long skinny screws that are used for front case fan. We won't be using those at all in this build, so those can just be put aside. The rest of these we are going to use, so we'll keep those close by. First thing I want to install is the power supply. This is the CX750M. It is it's slightly amusing to me that there are folks out there that are a bit snobbish when it comes to power supplies. Now, I don't recommend you get a cheap no-name brand power supply. That's one of the worst mistakes, and a very common mistake people make when building their own systems. They're trying to save money everywhere they can. The power supply is not an area that you want to get the cheapest thing you can possibly get. You want one that's going to not only provide more than enough power than what you need, but also from a reputable manufacturer that has good support should you ever need that support. So for that reason, I'm using the Corsair 750M. Now, Corsair has a line of power supplies, different lines depending on what the efficiency rating is, what the power output is, what the mean time before failures is rated at. And the CX line is Corsair's budget line, but they do such a good job with it. I don't have any problems recommending it. I haven't seen one fail yet. All my customers that I've installed these for are totally happy with it. And if you ask any of them, would you buy that same power supply again? They'd all say yes. They haven't had any problems with them. So that's why I'm using this power supply. There's no reason to get the more expensive Corsair lines, in my opinion, unless you just have money burning a hole in your pocket. So let's go ahead and get this opened up. I'll show you the unboxing here. We've got documentation, which of course goes over there. A nice big power cable. We'll set that down there. These are all of the cables we need to hook everything up. We've got our more zip ties and some screws for the power supply. We will use those for the power supply. And then right inside here, we've got this egg crate type packaging and power supply. The rest of the box is empty. That can go down there. And then there's always a little plastic cover over the Corsair logo, which I always recommend removing. It's just there to keep the Corsair logo from getting scratched or damaged in shipping. You know, Corsair says the rest of the power supply, as far as they're concerned, can get scratched as long as it's not their logo, because that's the only part covered in plastic. And then you've got this wire tied here with the silica gel, and the silica gel says do not eat, so I don't recommend that you eat it, and it does say you should throw it away, so we throw it away. Wire ties have metal in them. You definitely don't want those in your case. This fan is going to suck air in. It doesn't blow air out. Most modern case designs, if you're going to build it yourself, are going to have the power supply mounted on the bottom, and if they do, then you want that fan mounted to the bottom. If you're buying Dells and HPs and whatnot, many of them are still putting the power supplies way up on the top. So that doesn't really apply in the lessons that we're teaching here. And this is one of the reasons why a computer you build is so far superior than one of the mass manufactured computers. Not that they don't manufacture them that way, but when you look at the price range and what you're getting for your money, it's always cheaper to build it yourself. You're always going to get more for your money. This is just going to set down right down inside of here like so. We're going to push it towards the back. We want the cables closest to the hole. And now we can put our screws in. Next, I'm going to install the hard drive, only because that's the first thing I just grabbed. There's no particular rhyme or reason as to which drive I install first. I'm going to take that out of its anti-static bag. Yeah, these Western Digital drives don't have the mechanism on the back for the locking SATA cable. So this is definitely, as far as I'm concerned, a manufacturing or a design flaw, and it's one reason I may stop recommending the Western Digital drives if they're going to continue this, because the SATA cables will just fall off. They're supposed to clip into place, and I'll bring that up a little later on when we get to that point in the build. But I wasn't quite sure the first time I saw this on the previous build if something had broken on the drive, but no, they're clearly making them that way intentionally. I don't know why. So the anti-static bag, that can go there. More silica gel, that can go there. The drive is going to go in with the SATA connectors facing the back, and we're just going to put it right up here on the top, and that should just lock right into place. There it is. That drive is installed. Next, we've got our Samsung Evo solid state drive. I love that Samsung doesn't waste resources with unnecessary electrostatic bags. You'll see. Nothing else in the box. There's the drive right there. We take that out and set it down. Flip side of this has all the documentation and instructions right inside of here. We can pull those out. The driver, oh, this actually is 4.5, which is currently the latest version, I think. No, I think it's 4.6. I always want to download the Samsung software rather than use it from the disk, so I don't use the disk. We'll keep the documentation, we'll give that to the customer, but for now it can just go right over there. I love the Corsair 200R because it makes the installation of a solid state drive so easy. We have 4 places we can put the drive. I'm going to put it right here in the bottom left. It's installed. It's just that easy. If I turn this around, I can undo this wire tie that's holding on the front port umbilicals, because that's kind of getting in my way a little bit. And we don't want these wire ties in here anyway, so let's get the wire tie out and let's pull these cables up and through. Don't let these cables intimidate you. We'll worry about them later. Let's worry about what we're doing right now and don't focus on that at this point. Finally, we've got the CD DVD reader writer. That's going to go right up here. We're going to push from the inside out, take that blocker out. That can go down there. We're going to put the drive in. And you'll see I just pull this tab and then the drive locks into place. Can you see that? When I pull this tab back, I can now pull the drive out. If I push the tab forward, the drive locks into place. Now, because I am shipping this computer, I want to secure everything I just put in with the screws. I'm going to put one right here. There's one. And then we're going to match it here on the other side. Perfect. Then solid state drive, we'll use the same screws right down here. Now, if you're not shipping this computer, if you're not planning on moving it around a lot, you probably don't need to secure those drives in with screws. However, this computer is being shipped and I want to make sure that nothing breaks free in the shipping process. There's one screw to pull the hard drive in, and that's going to use a Corsair threaded screw, which is in the other bag. And I just need one screw. It's all it's going to take to hold it into position. And that's going to go right here. That's it. With that drive secured, now we can put the I/O shield in for the motherboard. And the I/O shield is going to be in the motherboard box. So let me just close up this bag of screws. We'll set that over here. And right here in the motherboard box, let's get this out. Open this up. And below the motherboard, as you can see, we want this I/O shield. So I'm going to take the I/O shield out, and then I'm going to put this back, right back where it was here. Take the I/O shield out of the bag and install the I/O shield. Let's turn this around so you can see. I'll come around here. Keyboard holes always facing up. At least on this particular case they do. And on most cases they do, but there are some cases out there where you actually have to put this in upside down. But this is considered to be right side up. You just push it into place. And there, we've installed all our drives and the motherboard I/O shield. And now it's time to prep the motherboard. Prepping a Skylake motherboard isn't any different than prepping any other Intel or AMD motherboard. We're going to open this up. We're going to pull the board out. And inside of the box, you'll see what remains are a header block. Well, that's new. Glad to see Gigabyte has adopted what Asus has initially created. And we'll get to that a bit later on how that works. And then we've got our instruction manual, our DVD with drivers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the box up here. We've got our SATA cables, actually that'll go in there. And let's go ahead and place the motherboard on the box. Like so, we'll go ahead and get rid of this packing material. And the motherboard here has some tape on the back, so we'll go ahead and open that up. And I want to grab the board by the edge and slide it out of the bag without touching any of the components. There we go. And there's the H170 chipset for the Skylake processor. You'll see to the naked eye, without real close inspection, it really doesn't look any different than any other motherboard. We do have the M.2 connector here. We'll talk about the M.2 stuff later in future builds. USB 3.1, it's the USB Type-C connector. It's that connector right there, that little tiny one. So we'll get into that a little bit more. In another video, we'll talk about that. Here is the Skylake processor. Let's just move everything over a little to the left here, or to your right. My left, your right. Core i7 Skylake processor. Ooh, ah. Let's go ahead and take it out of the box. You'll see there's a notch here that tells us to turn the box right side up, which is actually the bottom of the box, so that things don't fall out when we pull the box out. There's our CPU cooler with thermal compound already applied and the plastic cover protecting that thermal compound from being contaminated. So we're going to take that out, keeping the plastic cover on it. And we're going to set it here for right now. These are our instructions and Go Faster sticker from Intel. Those can be set aside. And then the chip itself, which we get out just through pulling up this cardboard, taking the chip out, and then just get rid of that. So here's our chip. This is the brain of the CPU. This is the brain of the computer, the CPU. And it's going to go right here. There's a plastic cover covering this because there's a lot of pins underneath here that are very easily damaged. So we're going to go ahead and lift that up by pushing down and away. That's going to lift up that socket. That reveals that fragile socket below. And we're going to take the CPU out of its enclosure here. We're going to grab it by the edges. We don't want to touch the top at all. and it's going to go in this direction. You will see that there is a white arrow right there, and there's a gold arrow right on the corner of the chip. And those arrows are going to line up, just like so. Generally speaking, the writing is always going to face the same writing on the board. See how the writing on the board faces in this direction? And so will the CPU writing. Not sure how well you can see that. See if I can tip that up a little bit there for you. And then what we're going to do then is just close this lid down. See how I kind of helped it out with my hand, and then it just stops naturally right there. Then I'm going to gently lower it down and move this lever forward. It's got a lot of resistance on it now. Lock it under that tab and remove this cover. Keep this cover. If you ever have to send the board in for an RMA, or you ever have to pull that CPU out, anytime there's no CPU in that socket, you must cover it. If not, you void your warranty. Next, we've got our cooling fan right here. Now on the motherboard, right up here in the corner, right where my finger is where the CPU fan is going to plug in. So when I'm hooking up the CPU fan, you see this cable is going to come out from this side. I want the side the cable comes out to face the same side as the connector. That dictates then that this is going to go on in this direction. It will still work if we put it on any other direction, but the cabling is not going to look as pretty. So in order to make the cabling look as clean as possible, we want the cable to come out in the same direction as the connector that it's going to plug into. Each one of these towers needs to be pressed in. We're going to do opposite corners. So we're going to start with one corner. Doesn't matter which corner you start with. And then do the opposite corner. And do that for all four. That's in place. We'll now handle the motherboard by that heatsink. It's the safest way to pick the motherboard up. This is going to power the fan, this cable right here. It can only go on one direction. It is a 4-pin fan, and it's going to go onto a 4-pin motherboard header. The connector is white, and the connector is white. Now, it may not be that way in all motherboards, but when you buy good quality components that match the standards that the industry has picked, they do often, when they do it right, the colors do match up, and it gives you the confidence that you're plugging it in the correct place. Next thing I want to do is I want to just wire tie this wire while it's out of the case, and we're just going to make that look a little cleaner. The final step in prepping our motherboard is installing our RAM. Now here we've got 32 gigs of RAM, and the logic behind getting this much memory is this customer does not want to have to upgrade the system for a long time. So they're getting more than they need. It's sort of like buying some clothes that are a little big to fit you when you're younger, and you'll grow into them. And that's the idea behind the components that were selected for this build. This computer is going to be used for a little bit of everything. There'll be some video editing, photo editing, multiple windows open for work. There'll be some game playing, and the customer does not want to have to upgrade the system for many, many years. So I anticipate, at least 6 years before even the thought of having to upgrade anything. By putting the 32 gigs of RAM in, we're maxing it out. So let's go ahead and fill up all 4 banks here. Let's open up these covers. This side here does not pull back. On some motherboards they do, and on some motherboards they don't. So let's go ahead and take this and remove the RAM. Here's our RAM. Got 4 matching sticks. They're 8 gigabytes apiece. Let's go ahead and get this opened up here. There we are. And they are keyed, so they only go in one direction. I'm going to start with the furthest back, and we're going to install that into the black slot. We're going to do the same thing. Just looking at this memory here and the logo, I thought maybe there was some plastic on it. It's kind of hard to tell. Yeah, you know what? There is plastic on it, and I want that plastic off. This RAM will get hot, and I want to make sure. Let's take that other one back out. Don't force anything, especially when you're dealing with the motherboard components. Everything should come out nice and easy. Yeah, I can see the plastic on that one. We'll just go ahead and peel that right off of there. Put that right back in. And because these are sold in pairs, I want to install them in pairs. So want to put the black ones in first. There we go. And then we're going to do the gray ones here next. Got our next batch of RAM right here. Get that opened up. It's safe to hold the RAM anywhere on the heat shield. Just don't touch the gold fingers down here. You'll be okay. Again, we've got the plastic. Get that plastic off. I don't know why they put that on there. Obviously, they want to protect their logo, but this is the kind of thing that'll give you that weird smell when your system starts working the first time and it starts getting hot, and you're going to be like, what's that smell coming from? And it'll be that plastic melting on. So let's go ahead and rotate that in the right direction. We'll put that into the gray slot. Make sure it's in the track correctly. Line it up. Should slide in nice and easy, and then one corner and the other corner. You do hear it click when it goes in. Our last RAM module, we're right back at the same thing here with this plastic. Is it going to kill anything if you don't take the plastic off? No. Like I said, you may get a weird smell, and it's just advisable to remove that. It's there for shipping purposes only. It's really not intended to be installed with that plastic on there. And again, rotate that in the proper direction, which in this case, the logo is facing me. Line it up into its track. One corner, then the other corner. That's it. That's our motherboard, all prepped and ready to be installed into the case. Now, to install the motherboard into our case, we want to lay our case completely flat. It's going to make it a lot easier to work on. Now, this is a much better angle for you to see what I'm doing here, because what we want to do is watch these little standoffs that are coming up here that came with the case. Now, on the 200R, they're pre-installed. Some cases you have to install them yourself. Other cases are partially installed, and yet other cases use other mounting methods. So whatever mounting method that the case requires, the screws also come with the case. So we're going to go back to the bag of screws that came with the case, and we're going to set those aside because we're going to need those to mount our motherboard. Now, looking at the board itself, if we take a look at the picture of the board, you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mounting holes. And for some weird reason, Gigabyte continues to put a mounting hole where there is no standoff point on Corsair cases. So I don't know who's out of spec, if Gigabyte's not following the spec or if Corsair isn't following the spec. So to correct that, back in the old days we used to use these little plastic standoffs, and I kept them. I've got a whole big thing of them. And what I do is I just cut the little knob off the end, and I'm going to plug it into where I can already tell we're not going to have a place for a screw, which is this hole right here, the one way here on the end. And the way I know that is these are all in a straight line. See, these three are all in a straight line. And then looking back on the motherboard here, you'll see that there are two here on the edge. There are two mounting holes here, and then one on the top that's slightly inward a little bit. But the three on this side are all in line. So what I want to do is I want to make sure the cables are out of our way. Watch your I/O shield, make sure all your ports line up with your I/O shield, and make sure that if there are grounding straps on the I/O shield, that they don't fold down and cover your port. So we're going to go ahead and put the motherboard in. Ports go in first, make sure the ports line up correctly, then gently set the board down, and you generally have to push the board forward towards the back of the case. And on the Corsair cases, at least on the 200R, they've got one little standoff that has a little nub that sticks out of it that goes through one mounting hole. So we're not going to use a screw here. And this helps us position the board and keep it held in place while we mount the other screws. You want to make sure that you don't have any standoffs where there are no mounting holes. You can see this is the one I put the little plastic under. Obviously, you can leave that blank. It's not going to hurt anything. But because I have these, I'm going to use them, and it's just a little added protection in case the board starts to droop over time. We don't want it to ground out against the back of the case. That's not likely to happen anyway, but I can guarantee it won't happen with that little plastic piece in place. And if Gigabyte's going to continue to sell these boards with these extra mounting holes that case manufacturers are not accommodating for, then Gigabyte should include a little standoff for that, in my opinion. we've got 3 standoffs that are outside the length of the board that we're not going to use, and those are permanently part of the case, so you just leave those alone. Maybe in the future, if you upgrade to a larger board, you might need those, but in the meantime, we just ignore those. So we're going to be using 5 of these mounting holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then of course we've got 6 and 7 here that we're not going to use. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that no other standoffs exist behind this motherboard you can't see. So we're going to pull the board out temporarily, and I want to count the standoffs I've got. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And knowing that that one doesn't use a screw, that leaves 5 that will require screws. That means there's no extras here. That's a very easy way to tell, just simply counting. If you have any extras, you must remove them. If they ground out against the back of your motherboard, it could damage your board permanently, and that would be your fault. It would not be a defect in workmanship or materials, and therefore not be covered under warranty. So since I know all the standoffs are in the right place, that's the way the case shipped. I didn't have to change anything. I didn't have to add anything. All I have to do is secure the board now with the screws. Before you do that, check your I/O shield and make sure that you can see all of your ports. Next, I pulled 5 of the coarse threaded screws from the bag that was included with the motherboard, the bag of screws. I've got 5 of those. I'm going to just set them right here on top of the motherboard box. I'm going to use my cordless screwdriver. If you're new to building, I recommend you build with a manual screwdriver. Always use a magnetized tip. It will not hurt anything, and that'll keep the screw from dropping onto your board, potentially scratching the board, potentially breaking a trace. Magnetized screwdrivers are completely safe. Again, if you're an inexperienced builder, you should be turning these screws by hand. Only experienced builders should be using a cordless screwdriver for the motherboard installation. So I've just installed the 2 screws that are closest to the power supply that this camera angle can't pick up. Then we've got the one here in the middle. And then finally we've got the last 2. One going right by the RAM. That's where the 6-inch Phillips extension really helps. And our last screw is going to go right down into this corner. This is a exhaust fan and our cable. I just want to make sure the cable doesn't get caught under the motherboard or caught into anything. Set this down, and that completes the installation of the motherboard.
Well, hi Carrie, I guess. This is a video saying thank you for inspiring me and basically my father as well to getting into the kind of game of building computers. I've been doing it myself now for about 2 years, and I have to say it's one of my favorite things to do, and that's all inspired by you. My father started watching your videos about 3 years ago. I started about 2 years ago, and that kind of led up to me wanting to try and build my first one when I was 13. I wouldn't be doing any kind of YouTube videos if it wasn't for you, because I wouldn't be building viewers. I guess you're somewhat responsible for the amount of subscribers and views I have, so good job.
With our motherboard installed, we can go ahead and begin hooking up the motherboard power cables. I'm going to go ahead and start with the large connector first. I'm going to feed it out through here and back up through here and connect it right onto the connector. It's the only connector it'll fit on. It only goes on one way. Really impossible to screw that up. Got our 8-pin CPU power. We're going to run that back out through here. We're going to bring it up to this top corner right up here. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a tight fit. You might have to wiggle it around, even pull the metal out just a little bit. There we go. And we can feed that in. Bring this back around. Man, that Lazy Susan, I should have got one of these years ago. Yeah, anyway, so there's a connector, a clip on one side, and this one is vertical. Usually we see them in the horizontal. So the clip is going to be towards the back of the case. So we rotate that accordingly. And we're going to plug that straight on, just like that. What you see in this little package here is the little G connector that Gigabyte is starting to include with apparently their upper end boards. It's called the Gigabyte G connector. And I actually like the way this works better than the Asus one, because the Asus connector, the Q Connect I think they call it, just gives you pins to attach to, and then the cables still fall off. This actually doesn't have any pins in it at all. What it does have instead are these extended pieces of plastic that are going to hold the cables in for us. And instead of reading the motherboard, the little etchings on the motherboard, this tells us power LED is going to go here, and we've got the reset switch going here, hard drive LED going there, turn it around, speakers here, our power switch, and then this is another connector for power LED. And we're actually going to use this one instead of the one on the other side. That's for a 3-pin power connector. Our case has a 2-pin power connector. So now I'm going to grab the power LED cable, which is right here. You'll see it's split. And it's split because that way you can use either the 2-pin or the 3-pin connector. And the connector actually says positive and negative right on it. It says positive on the bottom one, negative on the top one. We should be able to line that right up, slide it in, and lock it into place. Very easy. I love that. I've never seen this before. I absolutely love this. Next, we grab our power switch. That's going to go right beside, and it's going to snap right into place. You can see I cannot pull those cables out. They are locked in. Power switch, even though it says negative and positive, there is no negative or positive on a switch, only on an LED. We're going to turn it around. Now we've got the hard drive LED we're going to do next. Positive, again, goes towards the outside edge, just like the power LED did. So we're going to grab the next cable that says HDD LED. And the way that they indicate, I don't know why Corsair does this, but you'll see there's no positive or negative on it. Instead, you see this little arrow. If you look really, really closely, there's an arrow, and it's right at the very bottom connector. So for us to have the hard drive LED have the positive on the outside, we'd have to rotate it this way. There we go. That one's in. And then our final one is the reset switch. And there's our reset switch right there. As you can see, it says reset SW. There is no positive or negative because it is a switch, so it doesn't matter which direction you put it on. So we'll just keep the writing facing the same way as the HDD LED, even though no one's ever going to see it. And just line it up, push it straight down, make sure that that's locked in. That's how easy that is. I would love to meet the engineer who designed this and give them a great big kiss on the lips. Thank you. With our front port umbilicals all plugged in using Gigabyte's G connector, it completely removes all the intimidation now from the cabling. Because watch how easy this is going to be. We're going to feed this right through this wiring hole, right through there. Turn this around. And where we want to hook this up is on the front port umbilical connector here, which is on the bottom right of the motherboard. And it's so easy, it actually will only plug in one direction. And very easily, if all the cables are on your left, that should just plug straight on. And it's just like that. And that's connected. So do be careful when you're using this to only use the edges, because there are no, it feels a little funny when I was putting it on because all the connectors are on the left side. So the right side you can see is very, very loose. If I were to put a connector on the right side, that would help secure that down a little better. But that's exactly how that fits. And that hooked up our front port power switch, reset switch, power LED, and hard drive LED. Just that simple. Now, the other thing we can hook up here, this is our front port audio, right? So that's going to be the headphone and microphone jacks up front. And that's got a pin missing out of it. And it actually says HD audio right on the connector. And without tangling the cables, I want to run that through the same hole. And that's going to go all the way to this back connector. It can only plug in one direction, and the missing pin is on the bottom. So make sure that the blocked pin is facing the bottom, so the HD audio writing faces down. That's the only way it will plug in. And it's just a friction fit. You just push it straight on. And that connector is now hooked up. We're going to save the USB 3.0 connector for after the video card is installed, because this will get in the way. It'll actually interfere with the installation of the video card, and we don't need it hooked up right now anyway. So just ignore this cable. This is quite literally the last cable of the front port umbilicals. And that, like I say, just completely removes all that intimidation. This is the bag of cable that came with our power supply. Let's get this opened up, which is often easier said than done. There we go. And what we want to look for here in this batch of cables, one of these we're going to use for our video card. These old-fashioned Molex connectors we have no use for whatsoever. This is for adding yet another video card, so we won't need that, but the customer may want to add another video card in the future, and if they do, they're going to want that cable. And then what we're left with here is our SATA power connectors, and each cable looks like it has 4 connectors on it, and there's no limit to how many drives you can plug in. Basically, the rule is if the connector fits, you've got the right connector. And if the connector, if your drives are in a line where you can hook up all 4, there's no problem. You can do that, there's no problem at all. Generally, you're not going to be able to because the drives are too spaced apart. Let me give you an example. When I plug this into the back of the power supply here, we've got some places for plugging in peripheral and SATA, which is what this is. So I'm going to plug it into peripheral and SATA. I'm going to use the connector closest to the back of the case in order to keep the cabling as clean as possible. And if I run one power connector here to the SATA drive, then the question is, how do I get to this hard drive? Well, this is the thing you have to think about. If I go up here to the top to the optical drive, I have to run a separate cable to the hard drive, which seems silly when the cable's right there. So it just becomes a matter of trying to figure out how to efficiently use as many connectors on one cable as possible in order to keep your cabling as clean as possible so you have a nice, sharp-looking computer. So I'm going to run this cable out through here, just like that. We'll turn this around, and again, if you avoid tangling your cables now, it'll make your cabling cleanup a lot easier. And that's our fan header right there, which we're going to hook up later. And I just want to look and see where this connector needs to go. It looks like if we use the last connector here, that will fit without any problems onto our mechanical drive. And then we can run it right back out, just like this, and plug one of these connectors, I'll use the last one just to be as clean as possible, onto the SATA drive. So that's given power to both of our hard drives, but there is no power now to the optical drive, and there's not enough cabling to reach the top. I could move the drive down, but I don't even think that's going to get us enough space. So I will need to use the other power connector that it comes with for peripherals. So we'll get that wire tie off of there. Once again, I'm going to plug it into the same area where I've already plugged in the previous cable in order to keep everything looking as neat as possible. So that's going to go right down here on the bottom, and it can actually run right up to the top, just like this. And as you can see, it would be possible to share the same cable between here and here. But I don't think once we've done that we would have enough room. Yeah, there wouldn't be enough cable left. We're just a little bit short of reaching it. So again, either lowering the drive or using a separate cable. I like the look of the drive being on top, so I want it to have its own cable. And then what we can do with the rest of this is just clean it up, wire tie it, and tuck it away, something like that. Or if you want an even cleaner look, we can run the cable out through the back, just like we did previously. We could actually take it out way down here. And again, don't worry about doing your cable cleanup until your system is built and functional. Otherwise, you're probably just wasting your time. And again, we want to make sure we don't tangle this cable up so that later on when we do clean up our cabling, it'll be a lot easier. We'll just use the end cable And we can hide the slack back here with nylon zip ties. Again, it doesn't matter which connector you use, anywhere on the line, as long as it reaches and it fits. That's all the rocket science there is to it. You can already see, even with the cables being messy, they look pretty clean on the inside. To hook up the data cables, go back to the motherboard box, and you'll see that the motherboard came with, surprisingly, just 2 data cables. And we've got 3 drives, and each drive requires its own cable. That means we're 1 cable short. Now, I've done enough builds, and I have a history of, getting older computers and saving what parts I need, or having extra cables laying around, and so I've got an extra SATA cable here. This is obviously from an Asus board I must have built some time ago, because I know Asus uses these little white capped connectors. But they're all the same. One's going to look a little different, that's all. But that's okay, I'm giving it to the customer, I'm not charging them for it. If you're going to follow this build, you will need to order an extra SATA cable. Probably wouldn't hurt to order an extra pair. I am a bit surprised that Gigabyte cheaped out and didn't give us 2 pairs, given that this is a pretty high-end motherboard for the latest chipset. And we have plenty of connectors, but only 2 cables. A great place to buy cables, and this is not a paid product placement or endorsement, monoprice.com is the website that I use when I have to buy either monitor cables, Ethernet cables, HDMI cables, DisplayPort cables, VGA, DVI, SATA cables, any kind of cable that you need. I think the best place for the best prices and the best quality products for the price is at monoprice.com. In fact, they even offer free overnight shipping to many of the Western states, which is cheaper, believe it or not, than regular USPS postal mail. I don't know how they do that, but it's a heck of a deal. And if you need cables, they're a great resource, and I think they deserve the shout out, because they're not a big company with a huge, they are a big company, but not compared to companies whose names you've heard of before. Chances are you've never heard the name Monoprice before, unless you've been in the industry. So what I'm going to do here, like I said, 1 cable per drive. I'm going to start with drive number 1, which is going to be our solid state drive. I'm going to plug the connector on here. And right now I'm not going to worry about making the cables look pretty. This is going to SATA connector number 0, which is right here, right there, bottom one. That's why we want to start with that one first, right? Because when we go to install drive number 1, right, because that's drive 0, this is drive 1, you can see that the Western Digital drive has no way for that connector to click on. That's what I was talking about earlier and why I was so upset. The cable just pulls straight off. The clip does no good at all. And why Western Digital did that? Terrible. I'd like to meet that engineer and just slap him in the face. Just a good slap. I think that's what he deserves. Put that back. That needs to be fixed, Western Digital. In the meantime, might have to start switching over to SIG8. I've personally found the reliability to be about the same between the 2 drives. I'm going to go ahead and bring that through, and that's going to plug in. Actually, you know what? I don't want to bring it through that bottom hole. I want to bring it through the one above it. And again, this is a good time to make sure the cables aren't tangled. Even though we're not cleaning the cables up yet, when it does come time to clean up the cables, it's going to make it a lot easier. And so that is going to go right on drive 1, which is right beside, just like this. You'll see there's a 0 and a 1 written on the board. That's drive 0, that's drive 1. The CD drive is going to be drive 2, which is going to be just above drive 0. We can plug that in right now. And that connector is simply going to plug in right on top of the optical drive, right there. And right now, with the way everything is set up, because this board has built-in video, I'm not going to install the video card just yet. This is a good time for us to hook everything up and make sure the system powers up like it's supposed to. And just for grins, we can go ahead and hook up this exhaust fan just to get it out of the way. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this wire tie. 3-pin fan, going to go onto a 4-pin fan header on the board. Going to use the one located closest to the fan. That's how I know which connector to use. There's one here, there's one here, there's one up here. I think that's all of them. This would work into any of them, but I want to use the one closest in order to keep the cabling as clean as possible. In fact, you know, we can still hook up this one. Sometimes I don't hook up these front fans, but if they're going to have a discrete video card, then we want to have the airflow across the card, and so in that case, we will be using this fan. I'm not going to mess around with the cabling right now. I'm simply going to plug it into the connector that's closest, the fan connector that's closest to the fan, which is right there. That's got both the intake and exhaust fans hooked up. And now it's time for our first power on self-test. For the power on self-test, I've got the keyboard, mouse, monitor all plugged in along with power. That's all we're plugging in, nothing else. No other printers or internet, speakers, none of that. We just want the very basic things that we need to see if the computer will turn on. So I'm going to go ahead and flip the switch on the back of the power supply to the on position, and then I'm going to reach up over here and hit the power button. And we should see the fans starting to turn, which they are. And we should get some indication on the monitor that the system is booting. And I'm hoping that's going to happen. You can wait up to about a minute. If nothing happens within a minute, go ahead and use the switch on the back of the power supply, turn it back off to figure out what's wrong. So right now I'm not getting any video. That has me a bit concerned. We do know that the switch works, we know that the light works, and as I rotate this around, we can see that the system actually just shut itself off and back on again as I was turning it. So it may have been initializing. That's why you want to be patient on your first boot. You can see the fans are spinning as they should. And we're just waiting for something to happen here, some indication of a power on self-test being done. And I'm not getting any video. Oh, here we go. So again, patience is really important. I was starting to sweat there for a minute because I thought, uh-oh, it's not turning on. So I can't emphasize patience enough. So, you know, a good full minute of being on. And as it was on, as you witnessed on that first power on, it actually shut itself off and then turned itself back on again. Something about the initialization process of recognizing the CPU and the RAM that you put into it. So what I want to do here is I can hit Control-Alt-Delete on the keyboard and then just keep pressing Delete before the screen comes up. That should enter us into the BIOS. There we go. That's the screen I initially wanted to see. There's our BIOS right there, and we can check and see what version of the BIOS we have, because right now would be a good time to update the BIOS. Right here it says we're using BIOS version F1, so I'm going to go to Gigabyte's website right now, see if there is a new version, and if so, I'm going to go ahead and download and install it before I continue any further with the build. But at least we know everything we've installed so far is functioning the way it's supposed to. We should see the total memory being 32 gigs, which it does recognize. That's a good sign. And you don't want to change anything in the BIOS if you're going to update the BIOS, because once you update it, you'll lose all those settings. They go back to default. You'll have to do it again. So ideally, we get the latest BIOS installed first, then we change any settings within the BIOS. I'm not covering that in this video. We're trying to expedite this through. But basically, if we're going to update the BIOS, which you don't necessarily have to do, I'm going to do it because I want my customer to have the latest BIOS version. That will reduce the likelihood that he's going to have any problems as a result of not having the latest BIOS. The best problem that you can avoid is one that you never have to begin with. So I see it as a preventive maintenance measure. Some people are of the school that you shouldn't update the BIOS unless you have to. I say you should update the BIOS so that you don't have to. 6 in one, half dozen of the other. That's my philosophy. So I'm going to check the Gigabyte website and see if there's a newer BIOS for this motherboard that's newer than F1. If you're going to flash your BIOS, you must make sure you have the right BIOS for the right motherboard. It's very easy to download any BIOS and flash it, although there should be protection in the motherboard that doesn't allow that, especially with Gigabyte. But on some of the other lesser brands, they will often let you flash the wrong BIOS, and if that happens, the motherboard will be no good. So not something you should enter into lightly. And I do have a video that shows how I flash an Asus BIOS, and I'll have a link to that video in the video description below. The BIOS version this motherboard shipped with is version F1. That's the very first one. There's been 2 updates to it because version F2 became available and then F3 became available. So we just want to grab the newest one, which is F3. So we're going to skip over 2, right? We're going to go from version F1 right over to version F3, which I've got copied here on this flash drive. And with a Gigabyte motherboard, you can actually just turn the computer off. We can plug this into one of the preferably black USB ports. Actually, I've got my keyboard and mouse plugged in there, so it doesn't matter. We'll plug it into one of the blue ones there. That should be USB 3.0. We'll turn the system on, and we're going to hit the end button right here on the keyboard. It says END. It's right here on the keyboard. I'm going to just keep pressing end over and over and over again. And that's going to bring up Gigabyte's QFlash utility. Now, this is only good for Gigabyte motherboards. There it is. Update BIOS from drive, press enter. Select the drive as USB disk 2.0, enter. And there's our BIOS right there, enter. And it's verifying the file. It verifies it's for the right motherboard. We'll do the normal update. We don't need to do a quick update. We'll do a normal update. And as you can see there, it's updating the BIOS now. The other information you see here are directories I have on that flash drive. If this was a blank flash drive that only contained that one file, then that's the only choice we would have had. So just ignore this other stuff. That's just other utilities I have, technical utilities that I use, that I keep on that. That's my utility flash drive. And then once this BIOS has been updated, I will erase that off my flash drive so that I don't confuse it with the other utilities that are on it. Now, this process generally takes about 2 to 4 minutes, and it's very important that you do not lose power. If you have an uninterruptible power supply, it'd be advised that you use it when you're updating the BIOS. If it fails during a BIOS flash, it very well could require that you send the motherboard into the manufacturer for repair. Now, Gigabyte does typically have the dual BIOS, which is basically a backup BIOS, and Gigabyte support, when you contact them if you have a failure, if it doesn't happen automatically, they should be able to describe to you how to activate the backup BIOS. Another great thing I like about Gigabyte motherboards, I haven't had to use a backup BIOS in years. A lot of people are worried about failures. As long as you're using the right BIOS for the right motherboard, you shouldn't have any failure at all. I haven't experienced a failure in many years. Now you can see the system has automatically powered itself off, and it's powered itself back on again, and I'm not touching it. I'm going to sit here and talk to you a little bit while we bide our time waiting for the system to cycle through. And what we should see now is the system trying to boot, which it can't do because our drives are not initialized yet. When we install Windows, Windows will initialize the drive for us. At least we'll initialize the boot drive that we install Windows on. Now you can see the screen went blank there. It's come up and it's tried to boot and it's been unsuccessful. So I'm going to hit Control-Alt-Delete, and I'm going to just keep pressing the delete button. So we get back into the BIOS, and we want to see that that F1 is now F3. There we go. BIOS version F3. We now have the latest BIOS version installed, and this is actually a really good time to install Windows on the system before we actually go any further with it. We can actually complete the build now if we want and then install Windows, but I kind of feel like it'll be good to install Windows right now, and then we can add the video card afterwards. Because the Windows installation takes quite a while, and I'm starting to lose daylight. So I'll go ahead and do the Windows install now, and then tomorrow when the daylight's bright again, I'll do the final video card installation and cable cleanup in the system. Should be good to go. So here I've got the Windows 7 Pro installation DVD. We'll go ahead and take that out of the envelope, and we'll go ahead and put it right into the DVD tray here. And I'm going to turn the computer off. I want to go ahead and pull the flash drive that I've flashed the BIOS with. We're going to pull that flash drive out and put it away. Now when I turn the system on, it should automatically boot to the DVD drive because it's the only bootable device on the system with the Windows 7 disk in it. So this should all happen automatically, and I haven't changed anything in the BIOS at this point. Everything's left at defaults. Now, we should see a little bar come across the bottom here as it starts to load. You may even hear your optical drive spin up. The optical drives, it's not uncommon for them to get loud when they're loading a bunch of files off of a disk. There it goes. And we see Windows is loading files. Now I'm not going to walk you through the Windows 7 setup process because I already have a video, which I'll have a link to down below, that shows you how to install Windows 7, how to install Windows 8. A Windows 10 build will be coming up. There's that drive spinning up, as you can hear. The Windows 7 installation process is still the same today, except I don't do any of the Windows 7 SSD optimizations by hand anymore because the Samsung Magician software will do all that for me now. That's the only thing that's changed since I created that video. So if you want to see how to install Windows 7 and you don't have a Samsung SSD, but you have another brand SSD, then you would still follow those optimizations. If you're using the Samsung SSD, I'd recommend use the Samsung Magician software. Now here we've got the installation beginning. I'm just going to hit enter and enter. It's really the easiest thing in the world to set up. And it's going to ask us which drive you want to install to, if you want to install to the 1 terabyte solid state drive or the 4 terabyte Western Digital drive. We accept the license terms by hitting the space bar and hitting enter. We want to do a custom install, and it shows disk 0 is the 1 terabyte and disk 1 is the 4 terabyte. We want to be on disk 0, and it automatically partitions, formats, and begins to install Windows 7 on that drive. But again, refer to my Windows 7 or Windows 8 installation video for more detail on how to install and configure the operating system. All right, this is day 2. I spent all of last night installing Windows 7, downloading the 1.5 gigabytes of updates, getting those installed, getting the drivers installed, the Samsung Magician, antivirus. And I have to say the system right now as it sits, we've got the power supply fan running, rear exhaust and front intake fan are running, a CPU fan are running. I can't hear it running at all. The only way I know it's on is because I see the lights. If I lean into it, and this microphone picks up quite a bit, I'm going to lean into the computer here, and I don't even hear the normal hum that I would hear from something electronic being on. It is dead silent. Now, of course, the CPU fan will ramp up when it's being worked really hard. And again, when I run the 3D Mark test on it, we may hear the fans spin up at that point. It'd be interesting to see just how loud they get. But so far, I'm very impressed overall with the new Skylake system. Very, very impressed. Now it's time to install our video card. And again, we've got the GeForce GTX 980 Ti. And let's go ahead and get this out of the box. You certainly should have seen me do this enough times by now to get the routine of the unboxing. But we're going to do it again anyway. So there's the box, poster, instructions, driver disc. There's also a little metal emblem there to stick on your computer to make it go faster. Of course, these stickers will obviously make your computer go faster. Just look at them. I'm going faster just looking at them. Power adapters we don't use. There's 2 of those. There's our DVI to VGA adapter. Hopefully the customer won't need to use that, but if he does, he's got it. And then the card itself. Love this beauty. I think it's just a great value for the money right now. Basically, if you only want to play video games in 1080, and you're not going to go any higher than that on one screen, the 970 GTX is all you need. If you want to do 4K graphics or multiple monitors, you want the 980 Ti. Now, there's a lot of plastic they place on this to protect the unit from any scratching during shipping, and it's all over the place. You can see we've got some there. We've got it here on each of the fan covers. And we want to take that plastic off. Go ahead and peel that one off. And there's also, if I hold this way, there's also some plastic over each of these logos. And it's good to have fingernails for that, so you can get that stuff off of there. Got another one right there. And there's even some sometimes right across the top, but we actually removed that one already. So that looks pretty good. Then there's this little cover. Again, I don't know why they put this cover on here. It doesn't seem to really protect it against anything in shipping. You've got to remove it to install the card, and you want to avoid touching that. Now, this isn't put on here so that you can avoid touching it. This is something they do for shipping, because when you, like I said, to install it, you have to handle the card and remove that. So in handling the card, you'll see I'm holding it by the plastic fan shroud and the heatsink. You'll also notice there's no back plate on this card. The back plate would cover that electronics up. So we want to avoid touching the electronics. So we're going to hold the card as much like this as possible. I'm going to step around. They grab my screwdriver. And we want to install this on the very first available slot. That's traditionally the fastest slot. So the second and third slot covers, we're going to take those out of there. Hold on to the screws because we're going to put those screws back in to secure the video card in place. Take both of those out. Make sure that this little retention lever is in the open position. That's the closed position. That's the open position. And with the retention lever in the open position, we line the card up. Well, I have to take the slot covers off first, don't I? Let's take the slot covers out. That would help. I lost my train of thought there when I was fishing for the screws. All right, so now we got the slot covers removed. And now this can go on into the slot covers, line it up with the track, and then push it straight on. And you'll often hear it click as that little lever moves closed, and it is closed. I've just verified that. And you will see that when we put the video card in, how it's blocking the SATA ports. So that's why the order that we build it is important. Not that it's tragic that you would have to remove your video card, but removing it is a little tricky. You've got to reach in here and pull that, or push that little retention lever back before you can pull the card out. If you don't do that, you will, in all likelihood, break that PCI Express slot, and then you're going to be in a world of hurt. So we never want to force anything in building a computer. Everything should go together very easily, very smoothly. So I'm going to go ahead and put these two screws back in that we just took out to secure the video card in place. So there's the one, there's the other. There we go. I want to make sure we can see everything. All the ports are accessible through the back. And we have to hook power up. So I've got the power cable right over here. And this is the same power cable I showed you a little earlier when we were hooking up power to the drives. Obviously take the wire tie off of there. And the end that says type 4, the solid end here, is going to go on the back of the power supply. And this is a little tricky because we've got to get behind where we already installed cables. The connectors are back here. So we can temporarily unplug this just so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm actually going to go for the bottom one right down here. If I can see it, and I'm right in front of it. There we go. That plugs in. It'll plug into either of the two sockets that are available on the back of the power supply. And then we'll just plug these right back on. And they don't have to plug back in the exact same place. And I'll worry about exactly where they plug in when I do the wire cleanup. The wire cleanup is just something you have to figure out on your own. It's going to vary based on what hardware you pick. So I never really show the wire cleanup process because it really doesn't help anybody unless you're using exactly every part that I'm using. And normally this only takes a second to plug in, but I am struggling a little bit with it because I can't see very well. There we go. It helps when I try and plug it into the right connector. That's the other benefit. More or less with these computers, if the connector fits, for many of the connectors you have it in the right place. The only exception would be the front port switches and LEDs. And again, using that G connector, that made that really easy. So here we've got a 4-pin and a regular, I'm sorry, it's an 8-pin and a 6-pin connector. So we're going to push two of these together to form an 8-pin. The clip goes in the down position. That's going to plug in right there. And then this other spare 2-pin, we'll wire tie that out of the way a little later so that the 6-pin goes on right next to it. And those connectors say PCIe on them. That lets you know they're for the video card. So that's all there is to installing the video card. The last component we have to install is our Wi-Fi card. This is a PCI Express N900 Wi-Fi card. The box can go right over there. And the Wi-Fi card, we've got a very small driver disc right there. Got our instructions, warranty information, quick installation guide. We don't need any of that. Got a little bag with the antennas in it right there. We've got a smaller low-profile bracket, which we will not use, and that can go over there. And this is very, very easy to install. Let me give you a little close-up of this card. It's what it looks like. And you'll see it's got a very small connector on it right there. And you'll notice it matches exactly this connector just above our video card. We also have one just below the video card. For ease of access and to keep all these ports free here, I'm going to use that top slot, which means removing the slot cover. The very first one, take that out. The card's just going to slide right in there. Again, be sure not to pinch any wires. Push it straight on, nice and easy. And the screw can go right back in. And I want to make sure all these screws are tight. I don't need any of these coming free in shipping. I've been noticing these, for whatever reason, are not tightened. Now they are. The antennas, just going to go here on the back. We've got 3 of them. There is no left, right, or middle. You just plug any one on to any of the connectors, just like this. You just screw those on. Don't make them super tight, just until it stops. And there's an angle where these bend, and I like to rotate them until that bendy part faces up. I'm going to show you why here in just a second. So for the best signal possible, we want to have these all up and face them out like, see, it starts to loosen itself. Face them out like that or like that. And that's going to give you your best range or coverage. Some people, you can experiment with it. You can try putting them in a down position, doing something more like this. In my experimentation, I have found the best signal. And again, this is going to vary depending on the environment you're in. Is generally with that configuration. But you can look at your signal strength meter and be able to determine that on your own. I need to hook up the USB 3 cable. Now that we've got the video card in, that's the last cable. Almost forgot about it there, didn't I? So I'm going to step over here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to feed this cable in right through here. It's got a little notch on one side, and it can plug into either one of these USB 3.0 connectors. And we're going to go right onto that one right there. Really doesn't matter. This one is actually labeled as number 1, and the other one is labeled as number 2. It doesn't really matter which one you use. There are delicate pins in the socket, so don't force it on. You should actually feel it seat correctly. And there we go. I can feel it went on, and I heard it click into place. And you can see how that can sometimes get in the way of the video card install. It actually appears with this motherboard design, it would not have been in our way, actually. That looks nice and clean, just like that. So let's get the monitor, keyboard, mouse out one more time, fire it up with the video card. This time we'll be plugged into the discrete graphics, the GTX 980 Ti, and run some performance numbers on it and see how she does. Now, as you can see, I've got the system hooked back up. I've already installed the drivers for the video card and the Wi-Fi card. We're actually connected to the internet with the Wi-Fi card right now and running the 3D Mark performance test. You can download the 3D Mark software for free and run the same performance test on your rig and see how it compares. As I turn the computer around here, you can see the video card's lit up and running. I am hearing a very, very mild coil whine, just a little tiny bit coming from the video card, but it's got to be dead silent to even hear it. And as this test continues and the tests get more complex, I expect these fans to spin up a little louder, but right now it's still really, really quiet. Much quieter than I thought it would be. I can feel the heat coming off of it right here. Right off the video card, you can feel the heat. And of course, the test has only just started. This is a wonderful test. It's a great way to determine fairly what your rig's performance is through a variety of different graphics tests. With our 3D Mark performance results completed, it's official, the computer is working, we've done everything correctly, and now we can go ahead and shut it down. So let's do that right now. And then I can begin the fun task of doing all the wire tying, making it look pretty. It's the thing we save for the very last. With the cabling now complete, you want to test fire the machine one more time, make sure that everything still functions, you can see all your drives okay, and that you haven't accidentally unplugged one of your cables while cleaning up the cabling. Trust me, it happens all the time. So one last test fire before you put the covers on it. Now I've already done that off camera just to expedite this video along. Everything works like it's supposed to, and we can put the covers on. I always start with this back cover first because these cables here, the way they're bunched up, can interfere with getting this side panel on smoothly. So the way I handle this, and you've seen me do this in other videos, is I lay the system down, and in fact I think we can even keep it on the Lazy Susan here. I think, there we go. And I'm going to grab the side panel, and this back side is the panel that doesn't have any holes or window on it. This case doesn't have any windows, but your case might, and the window does not go on the back side. We're going to lay that panel on. It goes on about 8/10 of the way here, and you can see it won't sit flush. If I rotate this around, just laying it down, it will not sit flush because the cables below are set too high. So that's okay as long as they're not too high. You can actually line this up with the holes, and I put my arm on it like this and put some weight down on it. Make sure that everything goes in properly, and then slide it forward. I can tell I missed out on that one. There we go. So there's that side. And we're going to slide that forward. You don't want to force anything, so if it's struggling, like you see me struggling here, pull it back off, sit it back down. You may even have to go back and change your cabling if necessary so that it doesn't stand out quite as far, quite as high. And like in this case, I've missed this part. See how it's bowed out right here? So I want to keep doing it until I get it right. I'll make sure that that part gets seated into its socket. There's a little metal tab that fits into a slot there. And again, if the cables are just going to be too tall, then I'll have to redesign my cabling so that they don't stick out quite so far. We did have the extra cable from the additional hard drive, and you can see here I've completely missed. See these tabs that stick out down here on the bottom? We want those into the slots. And with enough practice, you can actually get this done pretty quickly. I'm actually doing it this way so you can see all the things that can go wrong. Now it's completely smooth as I rotate it around. It looks perfect. We can go ahead and put the screws in to secure that. So let me grab my screwdriver here. We've got the 2 thumb screws. I'm going to go ahead and start them by hand. Right here and right here. And then you can also take a look at that and make sure that it's not bowed out noticeably where it doesn't look good, because that would be another reason you'd want to redo your cabling. So I've got the screwdriver, and we'll just go ahead and secure that down. Perfect. Bring this back up on its feet. Now we can do this side panel. This one is going to go on super easy because we're not fighting against any cables. It's just going to go on just like that and forward. Again, check it. Make sure that it's smooth and flush all the way around. Take the final 2 thumb screws. Remember, these were the screws, the very first screws that we started this build out with by removing are the very last screws we put in when the build is finished. And we'll just tighten those down. And there's the build, almost complete. It's just missing one little final touch. So what I'm going to do is put the Windows 7 product key on the computer. Customers, most customers lose their documentation. They never lose the computer. And when you go, if you have to do a reinstall, and you go, okay, where's your Windows disk? They go, oh, I don't know. Okay, well, I don't need the disk. What I really need is the product key. What's that? Oh, I don't know. So by keeping the product key with the computer, we're actually doing ourselves and the customers a favor for future support issues. So I'm going to just place that right here on the back left corner, just like that. And the other thing I've been doing is creating these labels that have the month and the year the computer was built, because I often hear from my clients that they have no idea when I built their computer, and I'm so busy I don't remember when it was. So we don't know if it's time to replace the computer or not because I don't know how old it is. Now we can have no doubt. We know exactly that was November of 2015 that computer was built. And so when the customer calls me in 2022, I can go, hey, that computer's 7 years old. Time to get rid of it, or time to upgrade it. Finally, I've got my handcrafted by Carrie Holzman with my autograph, and that goes on the computers that I build. So the only way you get one of these is to have me build a computer. And what I like about this Corsair 200R is this perfect place for it, which is right over Corsair's logo. I guess that probably doesn't make Corsair happy, but their name is on the power supply and their name is on the memory. So there's no shortage of Corsair's name on this computer. So I'm just going to kneel down here and try and make this straight. That's always the tricky part. I want it straight and centered. That looks pretty good right there. There we go. Now we have a finished computer. The last thing I'm going to do before I get it ready to deliver to the customer, I've got to put it back in the box, but you don't want to ship or put a computer in a box with these antennas on here. So we want to remove the antennas and put these into the motherboard box. So I'm going to go ahead and put it right back into the same bag that it came in, just like this. And then we take the styrofoam out of the box. It's got a little arrow usually that indicates which way is forward, but this one doesn't have that. I think it goes on like this. I think. It looks right. We'll flip this over onto its upside down. Here we go. And then we can finish making this bag look pretty here. Just like that. And the other styrofoam piece go on like so. And I want to pay attention to which side of the case that the motherboard is on. So the motherboard's on this way. That means our video card's plugged in this direction, right? And this case is actually going to go back into the box with the face of the computer facing up, because that's how it came out of the box. So to match that, I have to turn the case rather, onto its face. And again, noting that the motherboard is on this side. Okay, it's very important to remember that, because we don't want to ship the computer with the video card hanging upside down. We want to ship the computer flat. So we want the computer shipped laying flat like this, not laying flat like that, because that would have the video card hanging upside down, and all the cabling could get loose in shipping, and then the customer will get it, take it out of the box, and it won't work. We don't want that to happen. So let's go ahead and take the motherboard, the case box, place the box over the computer. We don't put the computer in the box. we put the box over the computer. We'll set that down. Now remember, the motherboard is on this side, and we never point an arrow to what side we want down. We always point an arrow to what side we want up. So this is the side we want up, and I'm going to mark it that way on both sides of the box. There we go. And there it is, all complete. All we need to do is tape it up, grab the motherboard box that has all of the instructions and spare parts all in there for the customer, and our antennas for the Wi-Fi are in there. And that completes yet another build. This is my very first Skylake build, and I want one. I'm very impressed with it if you didn't already get the hint that I was impressed. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll look forward to seeing you again very soon. Until then, bye for now.